Welcome to the Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea De La Cerda, and each week I bring you conversations about entrepreneurship, leadership, healing, and creating a life that reflects who you truly are and not simply who you've been expected to become. As a 22-year entrepreneur, corporate executive, business coach, and leader, I've had the privilege of mentoring hundreds of women through major life transitions. Women who are leaving careers, rebuilding after divorce, starting businesses, rediscovering themselves, and asking one common question: how did I lose myself? This podcast exists because I believe so many of us were taught how to succeed, but very few of us were taught how to belong. And today, we're going to talk about why that matters. I want to ask you an important question. Have you ever been surrounded by people and still felt completely alone? Have you ever walked into a family gathering, a board meeting, a church, or even your own home and thought, I don't think anyone really sees me? Not the version that's productive, not the version that's agreeable, not the version that's successful, but you, the real you. Because if you have, I want you to know something before we go any further. You are not alone. For years, I thought that feeling different meant something was wrong with me. I spent decades trying to become someone who would finally feel like she belonged. And what I didn't realize was that I was searching in places that required me to abandon myself in order to be accepted. Psychologists tell us that belonging is one of our most fundamental human needs. Long before we worried about careers or money or success, we needed community. For our ancestors, belonging to the tribe literally meant survival, and our brains still carry that wiring today. We naturally seek connection, acceptance, and love. But somewhere along the way, many of us learned that belonging had conditions. You belong as long as you're obedient, as long as you don't ask too many questions, as long as you don't outshine anyone, as long as you don't challenge the system, as long as you become who everyone else needs you to be. But that's not belonging. That's performance. This conversation is incredibly personal for me because if I'm honest, some of the deepest pain in my life wasn't caused by failure. It was caused by feeling like I didn't belong. It started in my own family. I always felt a little different. I asked questions. I thought differently. I was more outspoken. I dreamed differently. I wanted more than what was expected of me. And I loved my family deeply, but there was always this quiet feeling that maybe I didn't quite fit. Something about me didn't quite fit. So I learned something that many little girls learn. I just learned to adapt, to become easier, to become quieter, to become who I thought people wanted me to be. Then that pattern followed me into my marriage. Over time, I slowly lost confidence in my own voice. My husband was incredibly intelligent. And somewhere along the way, I began believing that he was just simply smarter than I was, that his opinions carried more weight, that his perspective was more valuable. I stopped trusting myself. I second-guessed my intuition. I deferred to someone else's judgment before I ever even considered my own. And not because anyone explicitly said that my voice didn't matter, but because enough subtle messages convinced me that mine mattered less. Looking back now, that wasn't a partnership at all. It was self-abandonment. And then came corporate leadership, right? I spent years climbing the corporate ladder inside industries and executive teams that were overwhelmingly male. I often found myself as the only woman at the table. I remember constantly evaluating myself before I would speak. Will they take me seriously? Am I too emotional? Should I say this differently? Do I sound confident enough? It was exhausting. And not because I wasn't capable, though, but because I was spending so much energy trying to fit into a leadership model that wasn't designed with women like me in mind. There was always this quiet pressure to become someone else, to lead differently, to communicate differently, to be accepted. And here's what I realized. The common thread wasn't my family, it wasn't my marriage, wasn't even corporate America. The common thread was that I believed belonging had to be earned. That if I achieved enough, helped enough, served enough, sacrificed enough, eventually someone would hand me the permission to be fully myself. But that never came, of course. There's a grief that we rarely acknowledge. The grief of feeling unseen. The grief of constantly editing yourself. Of wondering if people would still love you if they met the real version of you. The grief of hiding parts of yourself because experience taught you that they weren't welcome or it wasn't safe. Maybe it's your ambition, your spirituality, your creativity, your intelligence, your sensitivity, your opinions, maybe your dreams. And the hardest part, then, after enough years, you don't even realize you're performing anymore. You just think performance is your personality, it's your reality. One of the biggest lessons that I had to learn the hard way is that fitting in and belonging are not the same thing. Fitting in asks, who do I need to become so you'll accept me? Where belonging asks, can I remain fully myself while we're connected? Those are radically different questions. One requires performance, the other requires authenticity. And when you're fitting in, you're scanning the room, constantly reading people, adjusting yourself, monitoring your words, monitoring your emotions, monitoring your dreams. But belonging feels a bit different. Belonging feels like exhaling. Some of those loneliest years of my life were not the years that I lived alone. They were the years that I was surrounded by people while also feeling invisible. And that's because loneliness, it's not simply about the absence of people, it's about the absence of authentic connection and communication. People can't know you if you're constantly hiding yourself, and they can't love the real you if they've only ever met your survival self. Here's the question that changed my life. What if the problem isn't me? What if I've simply outgrown the environment? We spend so much of our lives assuming that discomfort means we need to change ourselves. Sometimes discomfort is simply data. It's simply information. Maybe you're trying to bloom in soil that no longer supports your growth. Maybe you've evolved. Maybe your values have changed. Maybe your purpose has become clearer. Maybe you simply become too authentic for environments that are built around conformity. But guess what? That's okay. Growth often feels like losing your place first before you find your people. The greatest lesson I've learned is that you'll spend your entire life chasing belonging if you're asking other people to give you something that you've never given yourself. Self-belonging means trusting your intuition, your gut, that gut feeling, honoring your values, speaking your truth, choosing yourself at the end of the day. Not because everyone will approve it, but because you do. When I stopped trying to fit into everyone else's expectations, a lot of things changed. My relationships changed, my businesses changed, people I attracted changed, the opportunities I attracted changed, because authenticity attracts what performance never can. This is one of the deepest transformations that happens inside my program, The Inspired Rewrite. People often come in believing that they're broken, that somehow they've lost themselves along the way. And what they discover instead is that they've spent years adapting to environments that required them to abandon who they really were. And together, we begin peeling away the expectations, the conditioning, the fear, the stories, until people underneath finally get to breathe again. And if that resonates with you at all, that idea that that might be something you would like to experience, I'll include more information in today's show notes so you can go ahead and take a look. If I could go back and talk to the younger Andrea, the little girl that was trying to fit into her family, the young wife that was questioning her own intelligence, that executive trying to earn her seat at the table, I would tell her something that she desperately needed to hear. You don't have to earn your belonging. You don't have to become smaller. You don't have to become quieter. You don't have to become someone else. The places that require you to abandon yourself were never home to you in the first place. So today I want to leave you with 4 questions. Where have you been trying to earn belonging by becoming someone you're not? Where do you constantly feel like you have to edit yourself in your life? What parts of you are you hidden because of the thought that you might not be welcome? And finally, what would change if you stopped asking, do they want me? And instead started asking, can I fully be myself here? Your action step this week is simple. Make 2 lists. The first is every place, relationship, and experience where you feel completely like yourself. Your shoulders can relax. You can laugh freely. You don't have to perform. And the second list is every place where you feel yourself shrinking. Maybe it's the opposite. So ask yourself one powerful question: which list is receiving more of my life? because where you spend your life eventually becomes who you become. So if today's conversation, if this is resonating with you at all, I would love to hear from you. Please send me a message on Instagram. The handle is at Andrea De La Cerda _coach. And tell me, when did you first realize that you were trying to fit in instead of truly belong? I read every message and I would love to hear your story. If this episode spoke to you at all, would you please share it with someone who has spent far too long believing that they're too much or not enough? Because maybe, just maybe, they were never too much. They were simply in the wrong room. Remember this last note. The goal of your life isn't to fit in. The goal is to become so deeply at home with yourself that the right people recognize you immediately. Your greatest belonging doesn't begin when someone else chooses you. It begins the moment you choose yourself. Thank you for spending part of your day with me today. I'll see you next week on the Inspire podcast. Take care. Thanks for joining me on today's episode. If you'd like to explore what your life could look like when your business and life are aligned with what you're really meant to do, get a business audit. I'll personally review your business, look at your social accounts, and give you some precise direction on what's working and how to create even more impact and income. Simply go to AndreaDeLacerda.com, navigate to work with me, and select the business audit. Again, that's AndreaDeLacerda.com. Work with me and then select the business audit. And if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe. That way more content like this can be shared with you as soon as new episodes drop. Thanks so much for joining again. See you soon. Take care.